This is Michi here. Welcome to today's edition of Setup Guiding. We are testing and taking out the McLaren Senna GTR on rFactor 2 around the Nürburgring Nordschleife. No, not the Nordschleife, the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit. And we are also going to have a setup guide. It is the first setup guide since a very long time. Yes, I am aware, but we're going to start from the very static point of view with the absolute default setup, and I will show you a way to get this car tuned a little bit as we're starting straight here with the defaults. Where can I put defaults? There we are. We're starting straight with a default, and we're gonna put average fuel 60 liters, nothing else. Actually, we can keep it 50. It doesn't make any sense to change whatsoever. What can you adjust on the car? Gearings, differential, wing, engine mixtures and stuff. We're not going to look at that. Spring rates, ARBs, toe in, toe outs, dampers. On the chassis, you can put weight distribution and cut stir. And here we're looking at brakes, tire pressures and traction control. Alright, we're taking out the car for a spin right here on the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit. Sorry guys. Alright, checking out what is the delta or the performance of this car in the default. Speaking about the McLaren itself, it is basically a hypercar, GT3 spec engine, not GT3 spec aero, GT3 spec chassis, GT3 spec brakes, but as you know, the engine is a lot stronger than a GT3. Shortly adjusting a little bit field of view, you guys know probably why. And then we are warming up a little bit. As we are on the default setup, there's nothing really to care about as of right now. Only thing is to get a little into the groove, talking about the car while we lock up into turn 8 here, talking about the circuit. What is really important for the circuit is that we are having a good change on weight transfer. So, you know, going here into a left hand corner, accelerating, then go straight to a right hand corner, accelerating out again. So the car needs to be gentle with direction changes, needs to be smooth on direction changes, and all that kind of stuff. Right, as we have seen in the setup file, the brakes are currently set at 85%, so 85 kilograms of braking force. We're going to adjust that straight away. The car has no ABS, but the car is also weak on the brake, so you want to have as much braking force as possible for potential late braking and all that kind of stuff. So we're setting ourselves a little benchmark of what to beat with those 50 liters currently on the soft tires. You see the car is overturning a little bit, so the initial turning is very aggressive. You turn in the wheel, the front end grips, the rear end can't really keep up, and there is some pendulum effect starting, especially when coming from the brakes. You feel it just a little bit that the car is sort of, you know, doing like deep in, little out, deep in again. Once again locking up the brakes here into turn 8, which is an indication that the brake bar is a little bit too much on the front. Now coming up, Schumacher is needing to lift here because of the suspension being quite rigid. And again, the front end grip's quite nice, while the rear end is not able to keep the momentum up. And what we're going to do now is the first lap is still some sort of a warm-up lap, But looking into the second lap then, we're trying to improve the lap time and get it to somewhat replicant, or that can be considered a good lap. So the first thing we're going to work on is the brakes, and then we're gonna go straight out again, see what the brake changes already got us in there lap time wise. First of all, turn 1 though, hard on the brakes, hairpin, best overtaking spot here, so the brakes are pretty important for this turn. Then turn 2, keeping it tight on the inside, a lot of trail braking required into turn 3, and then keep to the left hand side, set up the car for turn 4 on the exit here, as you want to carry as much speed as possible. Turn 5 and 6 are pretty straightforward. Not even sure whether I want to call it chicane. This is actually turn 7, going into 8. Dunlop curve is a tight hairpin where you want to go early on the throttle as early as possible, powering up the car to the Schumacher as turn 9 and 10. Keep it tight on the inside, so have a good run through 10 on the outside, coming up to 11 and the third sector. Stay off the curb here on the outside, and here you want to be wide into the corner, tight there at the apex, and then carry all the speed onto the back straight. Flat out turn 13, coming up to the NGK chicane, laid on the brakes, can also be an overtaking spot. Want to kiss the curbs a little. Sadly the exit wasn't as good. And final turn, once again want to have a great exit, as the best overtaking spot is turn 1. So we just did it 45.0. Now, as indicated, we go straight towards setup, advanced, put here the maximum braking force, and reduce the brake bias at the front to, let's say, 50.5. What will that do? First of all, the brake pressure obviously increases the pressure on the brakes, which will increase the brake temperatures a little. Which will be relevant when you are following another car. So when you're in dirty air, the brakes don't get the greatest cooling, and with slipstream making you faster on the straight, you may end up outbraking yourself quite heavily, as the brakes may be a little bit too hot. And with a too hot temperature, the maximum braking torque is decreased, and with more initial speed on the initial braking, there is more to slow down, because you need to come down to what you need to make the corner. So therefore, getting the brakes right, especially with the cooling. Sadly, there is no cooling options here on the car, or is there? I think there is. So you need to always have a look also on the brake temperatures, where the higher pressure obviously getting the brake temperatures up. Now, what else is doing the higher brake pressure? Actually, it gives you more of an opportunity on your left-hand foot. Means when I previously pressed 100% on the pedal, 85 kg were applied. So even despite the car would be able to brake more, or I would be able to brake more while still keeping in control of the car, I would have not achieved more braking force, as we were limited setup-wise. Now, with 100 kilograms attached, you may need to be a little bit more precise on the foot, meaning a difference between 60 and 70 percent on the pedal now has about, what was it, 85? Yeah, about 12 to 13% more impact or more relevance on the brakes. However, we will now see in 2 laps what is the difference already. So we can brake a little later. You see that the timer at the top goes up, and we are at the apex of turn 1, 3/4 of a tenth in front. The change won't do as much damage or difference here in turn 3 and 4, as you probably applied just 40, maybe 50 kilograms to the brakes at all. as you don't want to lock up the tires. Now a little harder braking zone here into 5 and 6. So now we also feel the car is more of that, doing that pendulum effect. We're going to talk about that in the near future. Coming into turn 8 without locking up, but also a little later on the brakes, being able to slightly gain a time advantage over the previous done lap. Braking won't help us here and Schumacher S, but it will help us coming towards turn 11, as we can brake later. I think the tires are not warmed up already. They usually kick in the second lap, but we may be able to see it perhaps here at the chicane now coming up. We can brake a lot later, a lot harder. I actually broke way too early because I still was used to the 85 kilograms. It worked quite well here for turn 1, so we just go around another lap. And talking a little bit about the brake bias, we've put from 52.0 at the front to 50.5. This means more braking torque to be transferred to the back. So coming again out of turn 1 with that 10th attached. And this is the issue. I want to call it an issue because this is a behavior of the car I do not want to have. Into turn 2, also into turn 5, everywhere where trail braking is required, that the pendulum effect that we were speaking about is improved or is increased. As the car has now more braking torque on the rear, which means it is more likely to lock up on the rear, and this will kill the performance of the tire in a way that it is unable to transform the lateral grip or the lateral transmission. Therefore the car will snap out. You know it as a snap oversteer. Later on the brakes here, going a little too wide because a little lock up into the turn. However, we're coming with a net improvement in of 350 thousandths. Let's see what we can do into the chicane. As you've seen, the timer come towards us. We actually gained 2/10, I'd say, around the braking zone for the chicane. Coming across the line, improving the lap by half a second into 1:44.55. Now, once again, speaking about the brake transmission or about the brake bias, having more brake bias on the rear makes the car more rotating when being into trail braking. Also, obviously, may occur some snap oversteer, some unbalance during the actual braking into a straight. So usually standard street car got 70 brake force at the front, 70%. This you will probably never make your car spin. Well, a modern car with ABS and everything, you may never ever make your car spin on an emergency braking, unless there is ice on the road or something. However, in this hypercar, or in general in racing cars, you have the braking bias much more at the rear. The reason for that is, and I'm going to show you to it in a very sarcastic way, still being on the brakes with the rear tires locking up into turn 11, into turn 12, causing a snap oversteer, and I go now completely retarded on the brake bias to 45.0 at the front, hard on the brakes. Probably need to do it even more drastic. Gonna put it to 43, which is the minimum, and then whoops, there we go. Now we're gonna throw the brakes hard in to turn 1, just as we did before. The more you got it at the back, the more turning momentum you also have in the car, the more rotation. And there we go. this is exactly what happens, and you want to have this borderline so the car still stays in line, but doesn't step out. So you want to have maximum stability or controllable stability during the braking, and when you go into the turns and do the trail braking, you want to have as much turning rotation without losing the rear, neither without understeering. It is a way to balance the car. So I found 40.5 was a little too much, so we go a little higher again to 51.0. That gives you a good balance on the initial braking and keeps you a good balance coming into the corner. Also, when you do trail braking, it is very likely that the inner wheel that is unloaded can easily block or lock up. So in that setting, it doesn't necessarily happen, but it will definitely be easier to not lock it up, despite 50 or compared to 52% braking performance on the front. Now, next up, I'm going to show you how we can fix the gears or gain some performance with having the gears in correct order. Should we have a short look how quick we were over the start finish line? In the 6th gear 200, in the 7th 291. So we want to have a gearbox that is going around 300 kph, which is around this. Beyond that, we're setting up the other gears. We keep first, we make first a little longer, as in not as aggressive, go away out of the hairpin. We do one click longer into 2nd gear, that supports us through the tiki-taka section in sector 1, and all the other gears we're setting up to have a good sort of transmission coming up, and then we have a look what it does on the speed. This is already little optimization rather than essential, but it is important to me that you guys see what we are able to gain out of a good gearbox. Right, that means yes, here I think we're set. Going straight out, and it's not too much about the lap time right now. I'm just trying to do one lap so you guys really see quickly what we can do with transmission. It may influence your fuel consumption. Right now we had a fuel consumption of 2.72, 2.75. We will see how that goes. However, with the hypercar here being fired or being run with a combustion engine, I think it is a V8, if I'm not mistaken, and that engine classically needs rest for power, so it has a respectable amount of torque, obviously, but its maximum peak power it will find in the top RPMs, which is fairly important. Then coming out of the turns, we have slow to mid-average speed corners. Some 2 or 3 fast corners, but mainly we're speaking about really slow corners. That means a lot of stop and go. You need good brakes, what we basically started with. You need a good engine for the stop and go, and that's what we're currently focusing about. Why else could transmission be a game changer? It's when you're sitting in the slipstream and looking for the edge over the power. A good transmission giving you an extra few PS in the right area of RPM or the right area of acceleration can be the make or break when it comes to an overtake. Hence why we're looking more closely into transmission here in this setup guide. As I said, we're just going to do one lap real quick. So having a bad exit, sadly, but you will see on the main straight already that we are leveling out, and towards the end of the straight even gaining a thousandth compared to what we had before. So I think you guys have already seen the counter going from 0 to plus 0005, and then short before the braking back to 0004. That is because of an improved acceleration thanks to the gearbox. Now coming out of the Mercedes, yeah, the thing is with the cold tires, obviously we're lacking a little bit of traction, and traction control kicks in early. I hope I can show it to you better though on some other straight. We will still lose some time here, but we stop losing time short before the braking, which is another clear indication of improved acceleration. And here you saw that we gained massively short before the braking again. This is because of being in a higher RPM range in the same gear. Now we're gonna see it hard. 189, 190. Excuse me. Actually, we didn't see it. But maybe if I don't screw up the exit this time around. Yeah, a little better. 3, 4. See the gain coming, and the acceleration gain being even bigger and greater towards the end of the straight, despite it should level out. That it was a clear indication for the gearbox being more set up for speed, or having more power. It is a little bit hard to show because obviously not every corner exit has the same quality. But here you see it, 134, 135, 130. That was quite some improvement down the straight. Going up the hill. This improvement more or less comes from hitting that chicane better. Let's see if we can find some good improvement out onto the back straight. Yeah, this exit has been identical to the lap before, and now you're gonna see 276, 274, 273. So it is just half a thousandth really, but that can be a game changer whatsoever. So just a little sign how important a transmission and a gearbox can be. The actual effect comes into play as soon as we go up to the highest gears, because obviously with being shifting earlier or later, the change of transmission has just been shifted around in the first couple of acceleration moments. However, as soon as we come with a higher RPM, with a more optimized gearbox into 5th, 6th, 7th, this is where the resistance, where the drag on the bodywork is pretty high, and where performance and power really matters. So that is where a good gearbox can make a difference of up to a hundredth per straight, and this therefore very important. Right, next up, we are looking into suspension. Now, with this being the default set, I already told you it is a little it is a little too rigid, and it is a little too, you know, the car snapping around in the rear is always an indication therefore that the rear end is not able to cover the grip, which means we are going to decrease the spring rate in the back by 2 clicks, and we're gonna also decrease the front spring rate by 1 click. That is because, as I said, the car is a little too rigid. However, more clicks downwards on the spring rate make the rear end being a little bit softer and a little bit more forgiving. Looking into the anti-roll bar, we're going to do the same only in the back, going 2 clicks down, as in the front is, you know, the front is good on the grip turn in, We do not want to have it more soft, because then the front dips in even more and creates even more grip. So we just keep it at 5, but the rear end shall be able to have a little bit more, you know, rolling ability, to lean a little bit more on the tires, on the suspension. Therefore we go 2 clicks lower in the rear end. Also, with the rear snapping around, that means that the front is a little bit too easy on turn-in. Means we stiffen the slow bump a little bit. That keeps the front weight, the weight from the front further along away. The weight transfer goes more smoothly. And at the rear end we're going to do the same in the rebound, which means it keeps the weight a little bit longer in the back. Means that the weight transfer overall front to rear is a little bit more lazy. That should help the turn in snap oversteer as well. And we're gonna go out and drive and see what we can do with that improvement wise. So first we're gonna look at how the suspension overall settings, or the big suspension settings, apply to the car, if they apply to it in a good way. Beyond that, we will be looking into camber a little bit when speaking about the suspension, as we are here in, as I said already, in a slow speed area corner. That means we need a lot of rear end camber in order to give a good turning momentum, in order to give a good rotation across the car. Therefore going to increase the rear end camber, and we're going to keep the front end camber just as it is, because while the car is leaning, talking about the corner we're coming up right now, we're going into the right hand corner. That means the car leans onto the left side, and when there is 1 to 2 or 3 degrees of camber, the tire then being entirely pushed down by those 1 to 3 degrees onto the ground, given the maximum contact patch, or maximum contact available on the street, on the surface. But due to the fact that we got low speed corners, we want to increase the rear end camber quite a lot, which means that the rear end is more likely to not slide around in the back, but with a little less contact there is a little less grip, which means that there is a little bit more rotation in the slow speed corners, as the speed is not as high that it could completely, you know, destroy the car's direction, or destroy the car's heading. Oops. Braking never helps. It's a bit of a sad story that for this setup guy we always need that one warm-up lap to get the tires up to temperature before we actually can go for an improvement. But in bits and pieces I think it can already be seen that we're looking at greater exits out of those turns. Which means that the car has more rear end grip, the traction control is not working as hard, as we got traction control right now set on 4. So it gives a clear indication for the fact that the car is much more stable, much more predictable. So tires should be warmed up now, which means we're going to give it a shot around the lap again. Oops. So +2, and now we're actually starting to gain, thanks to our transmission change. we are trying to take advantage of the suspension working better in the first sector. And then coming up out of the first sector, sadly we lose a little time there on the exit. But you see that the car isn't swinging around as violently as before, giving us better exits, while we lose a little bit of time in the actual cornering. But that is just due to the natural setup of softening the rear suspension, because that will make the car a little bit more lazy when it comes towards turning. But as you see on the exits, we always gain that time back. A little too conservative here with the early shift up. So that's just purely without a mistake though here. So we need to deduct them 4/10, and I'll just go for another lap, as a change in the setup geometry forces a little yeah, adjustments while driving. So just to get them right, gonna try again. And I failed badly. Yeah, so despite initially not making the car a lot faster, indicates that we went a little too far on the rear stability. Means we go one click back with the spring rate and also one click back with the anti-roll bar. This would now need a lot more closer looking, or a lot more detailed setup. Means we have already found a quite sweet spot in where to work in, coming from the top, now going a little too low on the settings. That means that the truth is somewhere in between. Also, when we are speaking about the turn-in, we go back one click on the front and one click on the rear for the rebound. This is absolutely fine. Now, with the high curbs being on the circuit, those fast bumps are way too stiff, and you always want to set up the fast bump a little lower than the fast rebound, and also the rear end always a little softer than the front end, especially in Formula cars or in those hypercars. Now the suspension is much easier able to react on shocks being given by bumps, being given by curbs. So you have to decide, or you have to not decide, you have to compare between fast moving springs, slow moving springs. Slow moving springs have been triggered by acceleration and deceleration, and fast moving springs have been triggered by bumps, hitting curbs, stuff like that. That is where the fast dumpers are triggered, and your task is to have both set up in a good way that they work well together. So having super soft slow dumpers and super stiff fast dumpers is a bad idea, because they still work together to a certain extent, and depending on where the trigger is here in the physics, I think for a fast, depending on the car, fast movement spring has been triggered with or is 100 millimeters per second acceleration or speed, and the slow rebound setting is triggered below that. Now, with the curbs being meaning a shock to the suspension or a shock to the dampers, we have set them quite soft in the front, quite soft in the in the high-speed area means that the car won't violently jump around. So the bump gets compressed when you hit the curb, and the rebound causes the suspension to to un or decompress again after the compression. And with the values we just set, we said that the bump, so that the compression of the spring goes a little quicker than the rebound, which should prevent the springs from oscillating around. So first lap comes up. We should now also see straight away the effect of the car being better on the turning, better on the rotation again, which we see quite good as we gain a 10th out of the Mercedes Stadium. And remember, this is still the first lap, so that means we should still be able to improve it. Now the adjusted fast spring settings should give us good possibility to run more smoothly through Schumacher S. We will see that now, as the first curb is pretty hard, the second also, but we come out of the corner way quicker as the car doesn't jump as violently around as it used to. Same here for turn 11. That is the major points of the improvement, or the major points where the setup shall work better. Also the exit out of turn 12 has been better and more smooth over the long exit curb, and most importantly, NGK chicane. Hitting those curbs, yes, the car jumps around still because you know, it's still high mountain curbs, but as you can see, without any mistake whatsoever, we're coming in for an improvement. Coming out of the turns better, so we just nailed the suspension a little better. And despite it was the opening lap, already 80 thousandths of improvement. Looking to maybe exceed that. Car stays perfectly well in balance, despite hitting high mountain curbs here. Coming out almost identically out of Mercedes Stadium section. Missing the apex here of 6. But still, thanks to our suspension, we can get a good exit. Smooth around there. Let's see if we can right the curbs a little more. Yes, and look, that is even more time gain, like 25 thousandths or something, from being able to more smoothly right and touch the curbs. And that is really what the dumper settings were used to. So coming towards NGK chicane. If we don't hit that curb that hard, gonna do a better job. Yep. So the car is, despite jumping around quite soon and quite early, back in driving position, coming around the corner for another improvement, 70 thousandths. I'm just gonna go for another lap, see if there's more improvement in it. Remember that this is an endurance type of car, so we're not punishing the tires overly too much, or hot lapping around the circuit here in order to get for the ultimate time change. But I think you've already seen that some of those setup improvements got you a better performance overall. And you know, just from adjusting a minor details, we're not building a full die-hard setup right here. You won't be able, oh dear, yeah, I screwed this up. You won't be able to find tenth and tons of tenth out of the car. Also remember that I already had a virtual endurance race here at the Nürburgring. So coming from the default set, working into this direction is already a huge improvement. you know, 10th by 10th by 10th by 10th, and we've so far seen an improvement in every section. You may want to exclude the transmission a little bit because the potential is really low. And now, final part of the stream, we're looking at dampers and not dampers. We're going to look, as indicated, into the cambers, so improving the rear end camber a lot and also outweighing the front. This should give the car a lot more turning ability in slow speed corners. Means that the rear end, it won't be dancing around, I hope. Obviously if we overdo it, it does. But it will be much more turning, and I hope for an improvement, let's say here into the hairpin, especially around sector 1 here in this area. The car should be turning way more. It will come a little, or will become a little bit more twitchy on the exits, because now there's less grip or less contact on the rear tires with the surface. You saw that already, going a little wide and sliding around here for the exit out of Mercedes arena. But overall, I'm pretty sure that you will see a good improvement throughout the lap, since most of the corners here are slow speed. Means the car will enjoy greater rotation possibility. Lovely, the new damper settings around Michael Schumacher is. Also into turn 11, coming from that huge curb isn't as much of a shock when bouncing down. So let's see, 1 or 2 laps then. I think first sector we will have most or the biggest improvement. Oh dear, way too slow into turn 1. So despite 2.5 tenths up, down, we got ourselves a slight margin over it. More rotation, so we're already identical with our previous lap time. Tight, a little wide, and tight again. A little too late on the second tight, but we're all right. Kissing the curb. Oh, going too wide. Being a bit too quick here. Yeah, that lap's not gonna be an improvement. Wasn't meant to be anyway. But you've already seen on the exit of the Mercedes-Benz arena what the car is able to do. Also that chicane without cutting it even tighter, so without touching the curbs really hard, we just got very identical through it, even on the thousandths of a second exactly identical. That was even worse than just braking too early. So it is here though where we have the real advantage in the really slow speed corners. Maybe I need to again go for the third lap. But as you can see, we're a lot closer to the time delta. Again, means tires have now warmed up. Yeah, my driving isn't as good right now. Anyway, I think you guys have seen how the camber settings have supported the exit, the slow speed exits. And that's going to do it, guys. That's going to take it to the end for this setup guide. A big massive thank you for watching. Feel free to give some feedback and give some criticism below in the description and the comment area of the video. I'd appreciate that. Beyond that, if you want to see another setup guide on any other sim, any other car, feel free also to put that down in the comments, put that in the comment area below, give me some feedback and I will have a look whether I can make it possible. Beyond that, guys, a big massive thank you for being here, big massive thank you for watching. If you like what you see, I'd appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, like the video and come back for more sim racing videos. Goodbye.